And so media is one of those things that everybody thinks they know what it means, and then we ask them to define it, they usually have trouble. So media is just any way that you convey information. It can be art, it can be paintings, it can be sculptures, it can be writing, it can be newscasts. All those different things, movies, all that stuff counts as media. Mass media is when an organization disseminates the same information over a broad spectrum of people. So the same message is going to many people. Okay. To do that, before you used to have a lot of money, you used to have to be an organization. And what that has been replaced by rapidly is still there, it's still a powerful force. But what it is being replaced by is social media. And social media allows individuals and also organizations and companies to curate and share messages that they think are important over their network. So that is leading to that leads to some good, because we're actually seeing, like with what's going on here with the Fed up riots which are happening, we are getting information and on people from the ground. The bad news is there can be a lot of information, and we'll get to that in just a second. Too much information and too hard to parse and figure out what's true or not. One of the huge issues in that we've had recently with social media is how is the effects it has on our society. Part of that is because not that they were exactly hiding it, but they were not trumpeting how they make money. And in 2016, there were so many, and many of these politicians got voted out just because of how uninformed they were. Politicians who didn't understand how the internet works, doesn't understand how social media works. This is how it works. This is how they make their money. What they need is they need users, and even more so than users, they need users who are voraciously using their app or using their platform. The reason why is that the reason it's free to you is because you are the product, that your attention is the product that the social media is selling to advertisers who want to sell things to you. The thing is that, so I used to do public relations, as you know, and so with PR, I did some advertising and some marketing. There's an old advertising cliche, which is very tough, especially when you work at nonprofits, which is you will waste 50% of your advertising budget. The problem is you will never know what 50% is a waste. And what social media does is it makes it much easier to target incredibly specific people and then target them with very persuasive message for those particular people. That is gold. The price of doing that is going up. But for instance, in 2016, to his credit, one of the things that Donald Trump's political team did is they spent a lot of their advertising on social media. So sending messages to very specific people that they wanted to either get to vote for Trump or send information or messages to people to get them not to vote for his opponent. And so I don't think this time around that I would imagine, well, it's already happening. People are already using social media, very targeted searches to get what they need or to get the messages they want to people they want. Now, the problem with this, with the way that the model is, not for the companies, but for us as a society, is that it incentivizes people to share sensational and emotional content, or to use bots. A bot is basically, for lack of a better term, is a fake social media account, which you would use to either pretend that someone's got more followers or to push out information in mass so that you can affect what is trending for different people. And trending isn't as because of what's happened the past 3 or 4 years. Trending isn't as easy for you to spot, but it still screws up the algorithm. And so if they have a bunch of bots who are saying the same thing, it can cause what shows up in your newsfeed to change. The other issue with this, again, not necessarily for the social media, but as a society, is that negative, rabble-rousing posts, sensationalistic posts get more interaction. If you are interacting more with their platform, they can make more money because they have more of an audience and they have more information on you. So what happens is that the only reason these social media companies have started to police the people on it is because of the negative press that they've been getting. And the negative press they get can cause people not to use their platform. If people don't use their platform, then they aren't able to make as much money because they don't have as many users that they can sell to advertisers. Okay, so this is a huge negative problem. So beyond social media, that's a huge piece of it. But there are other things that are making it very tough for you to be able to look at information and know what's true and what's not true. The second thing there is the ease of creating professional presentations. If you have an iPhone or you have any smartphone, Android, if you know what you're doing, Androids are vastly superior to iPhones. But anyway, it is very easy if you can afford a smartphone with a little bit of help and a little bit of training to create very professional looking information. Before, when we were in the age of mass media, those mass media companies would actually help to serve as gatekeepers because it was difficult to get the bandwidth and to be able to create something professional looking. Today, you can buy a smartphone, buy a $15 lamp at Amazon, and you can look like you're just as professional as any other news organization. Another reason is there have been times where mass media companies and the government has gotten things wrong. And usually with the mass media, it isn't on purpose. It's just that they're misled. But that can cause people to doubt official reports on what's going on. And then the other thing is we're learning, especially because social media is so pervasive and so ubiquitous and can be so persuasive, is we're learning more about our minds. And what we are learning is that when it comes to our minds, is that we have very significant cognitive biases. Your brain is processing information at a rate that you cannot understand. There are a lot of things happening that to be able to even have this conversation I'm having with you, I am not only having to do everything to breathe and circulate and so on and so forth. I have to come up with my ideas. I have to ignore the itch I have on my arm right now. I have to ignore the leaf blower, which is happening outside of my building. I have to ignore my daughter and wife who are in the other room. I have to ignore the other stimulus that I could necessarily see. There might be something, there could be bugs in this room and I don't see it. Not that I'm messy, but that I am focusing right now on this. So what your brain does, just so you know, as far as the cognitive science is you will pay attention to three things. You will pay attention, one, to something that is an immediate danger to you. Your mind will immediately switch to that. You also will naturally think about things or look at things which provide you pleasure. Okay, so things that will release the dopamine, something incredible that could be anything incredible or beautiful will get you to cause you to look at that. And then the third thing is your mind, just to stay sane, is going to perpetuate its cognitive biases. There is so much information you're always taking in. Your brain will naturally welcome in and record stimuli, which is for whatever you believe in this world. And you will naturally resist or discredit information which is against the things that you believe. So if you just let it go, especially with how ubiquitous YouTube and social media is, you will always be surrounded by things that perpetuate your worldview. And even if it's not factual, even if it's not true, if it helps that worldview, you will accept it and you will naturally push away things which aren't. You can break those biases, but it takes work. And it takes time, and it becomes very difficult to do, and we can't know it all. Okay, so that's the thing you're facing more than any other generation has been facing before you. There are definite things you can look for, and I'll give you this slideshow once I'm done with this class. Feel free to download and to look at it, but there are things here that you should look at. The big one I'll say on this one is, are they trying to tell you a story? A conspiracy theory or a badly done documentary will focus completely on the narrative. If they can get you to say in your mind, once upon a time, then what becomes important is not logic and not facts, but story will become what your brain will gravitate to and what it will believe. Okay, so very important so when someone tries to do that to you, you need to immediately say, oh, I need to pay attention because you might be selling me a story which isn't true. The other things here are located other places as well. I liked this, the 5 E's to think about when you see something controversial you're not sure about. Beware if they're trying to sell exclusivity, if they know something that no one else does. Beware if they are relying on emotions that they're trying to invoke within you. Be very careful on their expertise. Do they really have expertise in their area? What do other people in their area think about their expertise? Look for the ego. Are they trying to placate your ego or build their own? And of course, earnings. Are they sponsored? What is the purpose of this? Who makes money on whatever message you're getting? And one of the parts of that as well is also to know the kind of natural media bias when it is a media related story. This is a great media chart. There's a couple other ones as well that you could go to. So this is one from media bias chart. It has from like original reporting down to like usually just like fabricated information. It goes from liberal to conservative. And as you can take a look here, in general, what you should be doing is you should be looking at this big green box up here. In general, that's the places you should be looking, and that's the places which should be having information you should look at. You need to understand if something has the Wall Street Journal or New York Times or Washington Post next to it, it is not fake news. It is not. They have journalistic integrity, they have fact checks, and they can be sued for when they are misleading. Okay, got to be careful on opinion pieces. If it says opinion pieces, there's less burden of proving the facts. But you need to understand that anybody who tells you that's fake news, you need to double down and be very careful on what they're trying to tell you. Below that is the yellow box, which has a little bit more opinion that can be a part of it. It's less opinion, which is down here, but more like interpretation that they will weave into it. Still a pretty decent, whether you're conservative or liberal, whichever way you believe. Those are generally good places. CNN and Huffington Post here, again, you'll notice is on the edge between that and just more unfair persuasion. A lot of that has to do with be careful if it's of opinion pieces or not. They have much more opinion pieces than others, and be careful. Again, be sure when you know when someone's giving you opinion versus reporting facts. So what should you do? What should you physically do? Is you should be for yourself cultivating and finding sources which do not have a stake in the game. You should be, I have people today that I met at your age who I rely on to give me the straight scoop, because and they ask me questions about education, and I ask them questions on politics, I ask them questions on business, I ask them questions on science, and several of these people are doctors. So I made those friends now. You need to pay attention today to the people who are next to you who are 14 and 15 and living lives that you know are trustworthy. Those are the people you need to pay attention to, because you literally are the leaders of the future. And these are the people that you will rely on to make sure that you're not getting mistaken or misled. I realize that's tough because you're 14 and 15. Beyond that, other places you can look at someplace like Snopes. I know in general, there's some people who dislike Snopes and say it's just all liberal and it's all opinion. And if you've ever used Snopes, it's not. There are liberals and conservatives who hate it, who say, oh, it's biased. In general, those people tend to be on the extremes. I have not read every article on Snopes, but the ones that I have read, and you should check this out on yourself whenever you look at something, they have given direct links to transcripts. They have given direct links to facts so you can double check what they are saying. They do a good job of both of calling Democrats out and liberals out. They do a good job of calling Republicans and conservatives out in general. Okay, but again, I haven't read every article. Another thing, if you just want to see multiple sides, I've used this in AP Human Geography, allsides.com does a good job of, hey, here's the topic. Here are, things along the media spectrum, so you can at least get a multi-layered perspective and do more research on your own. I would, with the avalanche of information you get, I would recommend creating some online way to organize information. I'm a dinosaur, so I use Facebook. When I can, I will start like with one post, with just an original opinion or reporting on a topic, and then I will take other articles and I will just put it in comments so that I can look at articles. I can find them easy. I'm sure there are better ways to do it, and you guys are smart enough to figure out what works for you. In general, you also might think about, you should research things and you should have strong convictions, but you need to understand that you need to hold them somewhat, at least somewhat loosely. You need to understand and have the intellectual humility to understand that, hey, I can do the research and I can figure things out as best as I can, but I can only do it as best as I can. Okay. And so you need to understand that other information might come out, which of course you should just because something's posted on YouTube or someone posted doesn't mean that you're wrong. You should understand that there might be times where you get something wrong, and it's not stupid for having strong convictions and having to change them. I would argue, again, my opinion, I would argue the truly stupid thing is to hold on convictions with overwhelming information showing you're wrong. Again, teachers don't usually use the word stupid. Maybe uneducated is the better way to put there. But you need to understand that over time, there's a possibility that your beliefs will change if you are paying attention. And that is okay. That's a part of living and learning. And then the other thing, my kryptonite that I use whenever I is that there are some people who are just ultra charismatic. There are people, hopefully, that you haven't met in your life, but you will here soon if you haven't. There are people who can sell ice to an Eskimo. There are people who are just so charismatic, they can just lead you down a path if you just listen to them too much and just go along with their story. I have had these people as bosses. I have dated some of these people. I am so glad they're not in my life anymore. But if you find them in your life, this is what I do, is I write out what they say. I am non-committal in conversations with them. As soon as possible, when they are gone, I write down exactly what they said. And then I take it piece by piece and make sure, do I agree with this or not? Because some people are just spinners. That's just what they do, and they are never wrong. If someone is never wrong in your life, then what is wrong is your relationship with them. If they are never wrong, if they always blame someone else, you need to triple and quadruple and quintuple check everything they're saying, because everyone gets it wrong sometimes. Everyone does, except my wife and daughter. But that's another story. That's an exception. Okay. So, but in general, you need to be very careful. And there's nothing wrong with it. There are charismatic politicians of all stripes who are super charismatic and can make their points sound good. So write out the argument and look for inconsistencies. Look for, can they prove the argument? I don't have time to go through it, but there is things here, some questions you can ask yourself about, hey, is this true or is this not? I got this from Climate Change Communication, which is in general a good website to talk about climate change. But just so you know, no matter what you would view on climate change, I'm sharing this with you because it is good intellectual information you can apply to anything. Okay, so that's why I'm sharing it with you. And with that, I need to quickly go through the Holocaust. There are two things that I'm really bummed I didn't get a chance to really go through with you. That is the rise of Hitler and also the Holocaust. Unfortunately, this is something, even without COVID, this is something that other schools are not teaching. And unfortunately, we're having a lot of people in your generation just not learn about this. And it is a crucial part, in my mind, a crucial part of world history. I won't have time to go through this piece by piece, but you already know how the Jews have had hundreds of years of anti-Semitism against them. Germany was a mess after World War I. That Hitler showed up and tried to take over the military, and they threw him in jail, which actually worked to his advantage because he was able to talk about Mein Kampf and his beliefs, which basically blamed everyone except for the true Germans. He is never elected by popular vote. He does get a percentage of the popular vote, but not the majority. He basically pressures himself to be named chancellor. Once he's chancellor, he basically uses that example to take it over and create a totalitarian government. Basically, get rid of the checks and balances that should have been there and were there for the protection of the people. He got rid of them, made the people rely on himself, and created a totalitarian government. Horrible. Horrible. Always beware of people who do not like checks and balances and aren't willing to be scrutinized for what they do. The other thing is, once he started doing that, again, the anti-Semitism was there, but it wasn't active killing or physical at first. And again, we've already talked a little bit about these things, so I will zoom through the race base of this. What's important to note is that he had people who went along with what he was doing. He had SS troops, he had a Gestapo, which were a secret / not so secret police who would basically, for even thinking or perpetuating anything that could be seen as somewhat dismissive or a constructive criticism, you would get punished. And what you need to understand is that when there's a totalitarian person in charge, silence is compliance. Silence always benefits the aggressor. It always does. Be careful on who you associate yourself with. So anti-Semitism went from just kind of a cultural thing to a law thing with the Nuremberg laws, and eventually is going to turn into a physical thing. In 1938, there's going to be Kristallnacht. Please look this up if you haven't learned about it. But basically, violence is going to be done against Jews and Jewish businesses, and then Jews will have to pay for it being swept up. Now, the important thing that's crucial for me to teach about here is, yes, Nazi Germany was very overtly anti-Semitic, okay? However, anti-Semitism was across the globe, including here in the United States. It is a hard truth to say, but I cannot be a history teacher and not tell you that. You need to understand that what happened is that before they did a lot of the overt, the concentration camps and ghettos and so on and so forth, the Nazis tried to get rid of the Jews by emigrating them. And yes, the America took 100,000 Jews, which saved those 100,000 lives. But there are people, including those who were on the SS St. Louis, who did not get accepted to this country or any Western European country. And the chances are that they died. They died because we did not take them in. So as World War II officially kind of begins from like a European standpoint, it kind of starts, you already know, you should know this, it already kind of starts with Japan and China in 1933, but 1939, World War II starts proper. And in the midst of that, we go from just these kind of laws into concentration camps and violence to Jewish people. And so there's lots of ghettos that are created and concentration camps. But the other thing which we have to say, so we have these concentration camps where they're put in places, and then also in 1941 we start to see the start of Einsatzgruppen, which are mobile killing units. So basically, as the Nazis would go to these towns, they would start just and on the premise of war, some of them would start with these Einsatzgruppen, they would start just liquidating, they would just start killing Jews so they didn't have to deal with it. Very sad. Now, the other thing, which I have to admit is difficult to say and is not fun to look at, but I need to say out loud, is that the Nazis weren't the only ones to have concentration camps. In 1941, when Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, many people in the United States were afraid of Japanese people. They were afraid that they would be spies and saboteurs. They were afraid that these Japanese Americans would be more loyal to Japan than the United States. And so at the time, we called them concentration camps. They're called internment camps now, and I'll get why in just a second. But over 120,000 people of Japanese heritage had to pick up what they had and had to move hundreds of miles away to live in concentration camps. And what happened is there are definite similarities. Again, at the time they were called concentration camps, we call them internment camps now because there was a big difference. But both of them were racist in nature. Both of them, people were forced from their homes, and both of them destroyed generational wealth. People had to leave their houses. People had to leave their businesses. There are very few Americans who bought the property and then held on to it and then gave it back to the Japanese Americans once they were out of the camps. So you need to understand that both of them were bad. Both of them. They're racist. They treated them as second-class citizens. It is also fair, though, to explain that the Nazi camps were much more dehumanizing, which is why they're called concentration camps in our vernacular today, and we call ours internment. That does not mean that ours were a good idea or that they were good. The Japanese Americans were treated as second-hand citizens. They basically created these like mini towns in these deserts. They tried to make their lives as normal as possible, and the United States kind of helped them a little bit with this. But so there were schools, they could wear regular clothes, they had sports teams, but they also had barbed wire, and they had armed guards who were forcing them to stay there. Not good. There's no excuse for that. None. There's none. The Nazi camps were worse. Doesn't mean ours weren't bad. Nazi camps were worse, were more dehumanizing. The loss of all personal possessions, even hair to get rid of, to prevent maggots, much worse conditions. Barely living with enough food, killing in gas chambers. We did not have that, but we did take away the civil rights of the Japanese Americans at the time. In the 1980s, Reagan admitted this mistake within his presidency, and we gave $20,000 to survivors of the camps. And again, I don't remember off the top of my head exactly how you had to qualify that, but I believe you had to be of a certain age. So again, 20,000 is nothing to sneeze at, is nothing that you would deny. But when you look at what they lost, it does not make up for what they lost at the time. A sad moment that both sides, Republicans and Democrats, have said was the wrong thing to do. But again, like I mentioned, these concentration camps were even worse than what was happening in the United States. They eventually, the final solution to the Jewish question in the Wannsee Conference was starting to kill them systematically in gas chambers. And we have lots of evidence of these camps, and and it's just incredibly sad. If you haven't read Night by Elie Wiesel, I would highly recommend it. Relatively short read, which talks, I believe, directly about Auschwitz, but just horrible. What's going to end up happening is that the West isn't going to know how bad these concentration camps are until D-Day and so on and so forth. I had the privilege of, when I was at the San Diego Rescue Mission, I had the privilege of working with a gentleman named Myron Lewis, who took San Diego YMCAs from just one or two in San Diego and made it, paved the way for it to become the huge social safety net that it is today. One day I asked him, just over lunch, I had no clue what I was doing. But I asked him at lunch once, hey, he was of that age, or the greatest generation. So I said, I've never asked, did you ever serve in World War II? And he got really quiet, and he explained to me how he was one of the first people to uncover the concentration camps. And I will not tell you at this moment the stories that he told me, but he found one that had been liquidated. And so when you come to whether it's a hoax or not, or whether it's a conspiracy theory or not, I know of at least one person who had no reason to lie to me, who lived not a perfect life, but a life of honor, who was insistent and explained to me what he saw with his own two eyes. And I need to share that with you. If you come across people who try to say that the Holocaust didn't happen, then this website right here, Jewish Virtual Library, How to Refute Holocaust Denial, goes through 60 odd arguments, which are commonly used by Holocaust deniers, and explains how they're wrong, And it's important for us to stand up for and to explain what was really happening. And part of that is because of what we're experiencing today. We are paying as a nation for having a very sanitized view of our history. We are paying that for the fact that when you learn about Martin Luther King, you learn about this first picture, and you are not normally taught the second. You need to understand that, yes, Martin Luther King was heroic, but it wasn't because he marched. I am not saying marching is a bad thing. There are definitely times to march, but he is a hero, just because he marched peacefully, but because he and the people who decided to follow him marched peacefully against real violence, which was done against them, sometimes by some police, sometimes by dogs, sometimes by fire hydrants, sometimes by people who claimed to be patriots and just who wanted to do the right thing and wanted to do self-policing. They did not deserve to be brutally hurt and to be sicked on like they were. And you need to make a decision. I can't make this for you. I am not saying go into the middle of violent protests. I am not saying to go against orders that you're given by your parents. But you need to make a choice. Are you going to be a person who is going to stand up and say something when people's rights are being taken away from them? Or are you going to be a person who either actively or by your silence is going to take away people's rights and are going to ignore the things that are happening to them? I cannot make that decision for you. You need to make that decision for yourself. I personally have known people who are peaceful, were in the midst of peaceful protests, who have been shot by tear gas and who have been shot at with rubber bullets. You need to understand that silence always benefits oppressors. And it is up to you on whether you are going to perpetuate what is happening or whether you are going to relax into the privilege that has been afforded you. And you need to understand we are not done when it comes to equality in the country, but the somewhat relative equality that we all enjoy in this country has everything to do with the sacrifices that Martin Luther King and the people who followed him did. At the time, it was not popular. In 1967, he was found to be one of the most unpopular people in the United States. And he's going to be killed for it. You need to decide which side you're on. If you are silent, you are being on the side of the oppressors. With that, that's the end of the slideshow. I don't think I said anything incendiary. I don't think I said anything that was overly biased. Anytime I talk about something emotional or something that could be seen as controversial, please, if I offended you or you want to talk about it, please let me know. I do not mean to be offensive or force my views on others. However, this is something that is worth talking about and thinking about. So with that, I wanted to thank you guys for being my students. Thank you for showing up on a Wednesday when your grade is basically done. I'm still grading up a storm of all the outlines that you guys have sent me. So I'm in the midst of grading those and we'll put those in. But thanks for listening. Thanks for showing up. If you will have me, I will still be one of your teachers even when I'm not listed on your locator card.